by the people and painted wagons of the peace convoy who were on the way to Stonehenge last month when they were, in their own words, trashed.
I feel that people have the right to live in the way that they want to live, and so long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. And the only way we hurt anybody else is by their own misunderstanding of us.
Just because we choose to live without leaders, we choose to live on our own lines, do exactly what we want to do. You know, that's the way we are, but we're still normal.
Because we're a peace convoy, because we represent sort of everything they hate, people who are free, people who, you know, want to live differently, people who have different interests, and they want to stop it because they don't want more people joining it, because then they'd have an uproar.
The problem with the Stonehenge Festival for authority is the fact that it sets an example to people out and about on how things could otherwise be.
The 600 people on their way to Stonehenge, camping in Savernake Forest near Marlborough on the morning of June the 1st, have many different beliefs and backgrounds. United only by the desire to live on the road and shared ideals about living in peace and freedom, they have been christened the Peace Convoy.
I was shouting at the police to stop, you know, because we had babies in there, and they didn't. They just carried on and on and on, smashing all the windows down the side.
I heard all this thumping and then a smash, and suddenly, like, all these policemen appeared out the sides of the van in front and just, like, started smashing the windows and, like, then dragged me and everyone else in, dragged them out and took them off and arrested us.
There's hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them, all with their black boiler suits and the visors and the black helmets and, you know, their batons and shields and everything. And, you know, it's terrifying.
They really enjoy it. You know, you could just see on the faces that they enjoyed it.
The razor wire surrounding Stonehenge was erected to prevent the 12th annual Midsummer Free Festival, which was due to begin on June the 1st. The National Trust, who own the festival site, and English Heritage, the owners of the stones, teamed up with local landowners and Wiltshire County Council to take out an injunction banning the festival. Enforcing this started a police operation planned for months in advance of military proportions. The police's strategy was to stop the peace convoy ever reaching Stonehenge. Blocking off the roads with council grit, they halted the leading vehicles at Chalderton. They then tried to arrest the occupants, who panicked and escaped into the Beanfield beside the road.
The central point was that the Assistant Chief Constable of Wiltshire, Lionel Grundy, sent men on foot into a field to deal with 60 or 70 vehicles, large, fast-moving vehicles, and he gave those men no means of stopping them. With the result that they started to chuck things. They threw stones, truncheons, they took off their helmets and threw them, they unbuckled their fire extinguishers and threw them, and those missiles went through glass windows, and the missiles and the shattered glass flew all over everybody.
They've actually found the stone they used. This is the stone they used to smash the windscreen. You can see it's a bit of flint, it's got all these in it. That could easily have shattered someone's skull and killed them. And they're calling people here violent and murderous, and that could have killed them. Just ridiculous.
There came a point in that field when the police violence reached such a pitch that me and several other reporters in that field put down our notebooks and started to shout at the police, "Stop doing this, you can't do this." And that's an extremely dangerous thing to do in that sort of situation. And at that point, my photographer was arrested, and I was threatened by a couple of officers who told me to push off. But it had got to that point where you just couldn't be a reporter pretending that it wasn't going on. You had to try and intervene to stop them beating up these people.
We said, "We've got a baby on this bus," and I took her to the front and I showed her out the window. Every single policeman who was round the bus saw my baby, and they just smashed everything, the windows. And the baby was in there. I rocked her back with her, covered her in my shirt. The shirt got covered in glass and everything. She could, you know, if it wasn't for her shirt, she would have been ripped to shreds. And they just didn't care. They just kept on smashing.
They then pulled the passengers out and got them on the floor. There was broken glass everywhere. There were screaming women. There were pregnant screaming women. There were babies in arms covered in broken glass. And I just hadn't seen that sort of thing before, not in my own back garden, as it were. Once he was on the television, turns off the television and thinks not too much about it. But actually stands 6 foot away from a woman with a bleeding head, crying for her baby. It was just something that cut me rather deeply.
On the evening before this battle, I was wandering around in the camp there saying, aren't you worried about what's going to happen if the police stop you? And they were saying things like, it's a full moon, it'll be all right. And they were saying that there was a power in the barrows at Stonehenge which would protect them. Really pathetic, naive stuff. There are nevertheless within the convoy a few people who are more or less crazy and who would happily throttle policemen. But the fact of the matter is that on that Saturday they never got a chance to throttle any policemen because they were in their vehicles running away.
By evening, 520 of the convoy had been arrested. Nearly all were charged with public order offences. Yet did the actions of the riot police go beyond using the legal minimum force necessary to make an arrest? The Battle of Chalderton may be remembered as a milestone in the history of British public order policing.
The policing of public disorder is both, as it were, a fundamental role that the police perform, always have performed, is what they were introduced primarily to do. And yet at the same time it poses tremendous dilemmas for the police, that, as it were, they need to ensure that they police public disorder, that public disorder doesn't get out of hand, and at the same time that they don't lose their reputation for restraint. And Robert Mark had a word or phrase for it, which was that the police should win by appearing to lose.
The police have got new equipment and are approaching, in a practical sense, public order situations kitted up in a totally different way. And we're seeing scenes now in England which are similar to scenes we used to see in Northern Ireland, because the equipment, of course, has been tried on the streets in Northern Ireland and is now being brought across here. That sort of equipment actually often doesn't leave much room for negotiation at all.
As far as talking to policemen go, we were just stonewalled. I mean, talking to an assistant chief constable on the Saturday afternoon, we explained quite succinctly who we are and what our function was, and he just said he hadn't got anything to say, and that what he said was going to happen, and that was as far as he would go, and there was nothing I could offer our side to try and reduce the temperature.
Nearly all the convoy were eventually released on bail conditions that they should not venture within 25 miles of Stonehenge. Still under surveillance, most took shelter in Savernake Forest while trying to get their vehicles back from the police. Wiltshire landowners have never played willing hosts to the convoy. This time the reluctant landlord was the Earl of Cardigan.
On the Sunday morning, after I had witnessed at very close hand the events of the Saturday, the police rang me on the Sunday morning and said we would like to send in some, I understood, 200 riot police into the campsite, which of course with many of the men in captivity would have been abnormally full of women and children, for them to finish unfinished business, shall we say. And having seen what I did see on Saturday, I thought that was not necessarily for the best, and so I again said, no riot police in the forest, thank you.
I've lost my home. The police have impounded my bus. I don't know why, because I haven't done anything wrong with it, and they won't release it. They won't even let me go onto my bus to get my kids' clothes, toys, or anything like that. I mean, it's just outrageous, and we've got absolutely nothing.
There are people here who've been trashed out 4 times in a year, one place and another, starting at Nostell Priory the end of last summer, up in Yorkshire. They've not only been hounded from one site to another, but they've been trashed out in this way as well, and it hasn't created a big media stir because it's been happening to less than that number of people that it happened to on Saturday.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we only become of interest when there's a problem. I mean, the fact that a few hundred people sit together on top of a Welsh mountain top and don't get in anybody's hair is not news. I mean, it's only when there's a major punch-up with the police, for whatever reason, that we suddenly become inundated with lenses and sound crews and everything that goes down with it. I think that Mr. and Mrs. Jones have read papers in their living room like the News of the World last year that described about the peace convoy. I mean, I read about myself in that newspaper and didn't recognise myself at all.
They're sort of portraying us as we're a band of people who are going around smashing everything up. But we're not, because we travel together and because we have hardships like what happened the other day. You know, that brings us closer together. Even people we don't know, we don't know the names of, we're all sort of together and suffer together and live together and eat together almost. And we all unite. And we are normal people. Like, I've got O levels and A levels, and I went to a sort of good school, and my baby's quite normal, as you can see here. I mean, she's just the same as any other baby, and I'm just the same as anybody else here on the convoy.
I mean, it was like the reports on when the convoy was actually moving, things like terrified locals locked themselves in houses. Well, they were that terrified that as we were going past, they'd bring the kids out and pointing and waving and giving us money, thought we were a carnival.
There's a lot of locals always seem to be portrayed or to have an image in people's minds of being hostile to anything like this. And in fact, like, the people from Marlborough and local villages have been so fantastic. They've stopped our people in the streets and given them food and money, and helped us anytime they were able. They helped us.
I've given up looking for a job. I had when I was I've been on the dole for 2 years now, over 2 years, and I gave up about the first 8 months because I had a friend who died because she was looking for a job. She committed suicide, she couldn't find one, and I just gave up after that, really, and just started doing things that I wanted to do.
For people to actually be able to live anything like a comfortable existence on the dole, one of the ways, maybe the only way that they can do it, is to actually dispose of the house that has all the things that go with it, like the rates and the water rates and the electricity bills and the gas bills and so on and so on and so on. And the things that go with it, with the kind of brick box life that people have in the cities, where there is no sense of community. They're cut off from the people around them.
I know that if I'm stuck here and I haven't got any backing, I haven't got any food, that I'll never starve, I'll never go without a smoke, because there's people who are willing to share. You walk up to them and say, "You've got a cigarette," and they'll give you half of the last one, sort of thing. Whereas in society, you walk out of those gates and you've got to instantly have money on you to survive. Whereas in here, you don't need that. And if you're living in a society where you've got a boss who's telling you what to do, then you could be doing something you don't agree with, and you couldn't justify it to yourself. And my conscience is clear, because whatever decision I make, I do it because I want to do it, not because somebody's told.
The Rainbow Warriors, when they were evicted from Molesworth, were growing food for themselves and food for Ethiopia. I mean, they were growing it for the Ethiopians long before anybody else sort of started publicising the famine there very much. That wheat was destroyed when they were evicted by the military.
The last time the headlines hit the peace convoy was when they were evicted from the Molesworth nuclear base in February. They had joined up with the self-styled Rainbow Village, who were living on the site as part of the protest against the stationing of American cruise missiles. They were caught by surprise when 2,000 troops and 1,000 police were sent in to evict 150 peace campers in a secret operation ordered by Michael Heseltine. Since leaving Molesworth, the convoy has been moved on from site to site. Eviction and a continual police guard have become a way of life.
Well, I think it's always the case that the people who are going to confront the machinery of the state in its various respects are those who are dissident, who are going to protest, who do stand outside the normal consensus. And insofar as you have a more conflictual society, more conflictual political situation, then that is more conducive to that general situation. But I don't think that that is in itself something which is either in the control of the police or something that they are in any way dictating. What may happen is that, of course, that the capacity to control things by coercive means might itself encourage politicians to become much more confrontational.
I mean, they never do stamp out opposition. No matter how hard they try, they can't. There's opposition in the most totalitarian regimes, you know. There's always some form of opposition there. They can't stamp it out because it's an idea. It's not a physical thing, it's an idea. And that just lasts forever.
We see it as part of a lot of repression that is going on, particularly to people who have adopted this sort of lifestyle. And as I say, more and more people are being forced into it. More people will be forced into it as a result of the government's cuts on people claiming a bed and breakfast allowance. People will be shifted on from one place to another every 2 weeks.
Was it car or bus? I think it's over there. You got vehicle number?
When people were released from custody and went back to claim what was more than their vehicles, what was in fact their homes, then they were prevented from getting those back immediately by the police.
What is the number of the vehicle?
I told you I don't know.
You've got a 22
I think it's
in there.
NHR. Something. It's an M Reg. Peugeot 504 estate.
NHR 452N. And the same position applies to yourself.
It's blue tape, is it?
It's blue tape that's moving time.
There was a very extensive bureaucratic procedure that was put into force, which meant that people had to wait 12 hours, 14 hours, days sometimes sleeping outside the pound where the cars were before they could get their vehicles.
Should we with it?
Keys aren't in there. They're in the ignition.
So we'll go back up and
Where's all
some
this
shit
smash that?
Don't know.
You don't know them? Oh, don't.
Well, you know the vehicle's been searched.
When the buses were released, most were in such bad condition that they had to be towed away. The police claimed the vehicles were needed as evidence. Since being abandoned on the Beanfield battleground, these homes on wheels had all been subjected to a thorough search.
If the police impounded all vehicles that they thought were material evidence for crime, then we would have massive car pounds all over the country. And in fact, it is clear that those vehicles are not being held for evidence in any case. They've all been released now. The cases aren't due until August. They were not needed for material evidence.
I finally got my home back after a week, and this is the sort of state I find it in, and normally I'm not an untidy person. This is my baby's bed that he was asleep in when the police broke the window. And the front of the bus, I mean, mine was probably the best bus on the circuit, and it's just been totally wrecked. We had to hotwire it to get it here because the ignition's been taken out. Where do I start to clear it up? You know, all this damage, and I mean, about the only thing that works is the windscreen wipers. I haven't got a windscreen anymore. Oh, this is ridiculous.
They pulled up the table off the floor, they'd ripped all the hangings down from the wall, they'd covered everything in butter, and there was a tin of tuna fish which had been stabbed open with a knife and spread everywhere. Yoghurt pots had been opened, the tilly lamp. They even broke some of the baby's toys, like actually snapped them in half. I mean, it wasn't as if they'd accidentally broken them while standing on something. Can you see that? Smash. And camera. Perfectly good camera. It's been gouged inside and deliberately sabotaged so it can't be used again. I mean, if that's searching for something, they're crazy.
Wiltshire police have declined to discuss the events surrounding June the 1st on the grounds that they are sub judice. But the closing off of roads, the use of roadblocks to question and sometimes stop people entering the Stonehenge area, could give rise to fears that the whole operation is an escalation of the police's paramilitary role. Wiltshire police were one of the forces drafted in to help with the policing of the miners' strike, and there is anxiety that Chalderton went even further.
The police do have a duty to prevent a breach of the peace, and in fact the courts decided during the miners' strike that when there was a breach of the peace happening very near in time and very near in place, then the police can stop people going towards that breach of the peace. If they know that a person's going to be harmed or property is going to be harmed, they can stop people going towards that area. That wasn't the situation at Chalderton at all. There was only a civil injunction. No criminal laws had been broken. As we understand it, the police had not been asked to help the landowners evict any trespassers because nobody had even trespassed at that point. So the police took action using their powers under the criminal law, we think wrongly, before any crime had been committed and without having been asked by landowners to help avoid some crime being committed.
The steps that had to be taken to prevent it were really a response to the declaration by the spokesman of those who come to the festival that they were determined to ignore the injunctions. You don't have to put up the barbed wire or have barriers but for that determination. And I very much hope that in future years we won't see this same scale of operation again. But I must stress that the National Trust will continue to say that we can't have the festival on this land.
On February the 26th at County Hall in Trowbridge, the Chief Constable Donald Smith was one of those who took part in a meeting which decided that this was the year when the convoy were going to be stopped and that the means for doing that should be a High Court injunction.
The National Trust took a perfectly responsible decision and is not itself responsible for the police, what the police have to do. The police were there to uphold the injunctions. They don't want confrontation either.
If you asked the police what they thought they were doing in that field, they would tell you that they were trying to prevent a breach of the peace occurring at Stonehenge and that they were trying to stop the festival. It seems to me that their so-called strategy in that field doesn't make any sense unless you assume that their real purpose was to smash the convoy, to get it out of Wiltshire, not just that weekend, but forever, to destroy the bloody thing, get it out of their hair for good. And that, I believe, must have been underlying it.
I think it's very sad that it isn't somewhere, preferably well away from Savernake, that they can't go and do whatever it is that pleases them. I'm not saying there should be a no-go area where the police can't go, and certainly the campers' way of life and values and attitudes are certainly not mine, nor mine theirs. But I do think the system, in an ideal system, there would be room for both of us, and if a site could be found, certainly not Stonehenge, but an area of land where they could live their life with their values, believing in whatever gods they believe in, somewhere else, what a happier world this would be.
Stonehenge is, and it's like the centre of the world, well, centre of Britain at any rate for us, and centre of our world, because it's the one place in the year where everybody comes together, everybody, not people who are on convoy just, but everybody. There's loads and loads of people from the cities all over the country.
They can't afford to go to places like Glastonbury where they've got to pay 16 quid a ticket because they're all on the dole. They got nothing. The only way that someone who's stuck in one of our decaying inner cities on pitiful existence on 25 quid a week dole money can actually get out of it and have a summer holiday of any sort is to go somewhere like Stonehenge. There's the revival in interest in our sort of pre-Christian heritage within the context we've got now of a materialist society which is clearly falling apart and not satisfying any sort of aspirations among people.
We want to go there because it's a temple of the sun, you see, and the sun is life, and we worship life. Life is what everybody has. It's the supreme gift. If you didn't have life, you wouldn't have anything. It follows, obviously.
I think to a lot of people out there, Stonehenge is a church. I think throughout history people have gone to fair lengths to defend their church, and I wouldn't always say that it had been right that they should do so, but nevertheless that's the nature of human nature. A lot of my friends would definitely have more in common with Stonehenge than they would the Church of England establishment at the end of the street, and they don't see any reason at all, because of some present-day legal piece of paper, why they should be prevented from pursuing any right to celebrate in that respect.
Well, a lot of people during the year, you know, from Stonehenge to Stonehenge, the babies born in that year are named at the solstice. And my baby was born the last year, and I was hoping to name him at the stones during the solstice.
As well as christening ceremonies, some of the convoy, such as Carol and Nando, were hoping to have a pagan marriage service. But the injunction was not only against holding the festival on National Trust land, it also banned people from going to the stones themselves for these solstice ceremonies.
If you look at our law on the preservation of ancient monuments, it's very much biased towards the public having access to it and having a body who will look after the monuments, who will clear up the rubbish and make sure that the public can continue having access to it. The recent actions of banning the public from ancient monuments, which to many of them have a very great religious significance, completely cuts across the way in which the law was originally framed and was originally devised.
The Trust has become increasingly concerned about the growing scale of the campsite which took place here, not just on the solstice day itself, but for some 6 weeks surrounding that date. And in the last 2 years, very considerable damage has resulted from that campsite, and last year the damage was on a scale which cost something like £20,000 to restore and repair, a cost to the National Trust itself. And whatever the people who come say, that damage did occur and was really irreconcilable, I'm afraid, with our duty to protect the land.
I can understand that they want to protect the stones, but I think you'll find amongst all the people here, nobody would even dream of damaging the stones. But it's more of a matter of civil liberties, that people should have the right to go to a place like Stonehenge, which is for the people. It was built for the people. It is the people's stones. And it's wrong that we should be discriminated against in this way.
The midsummer solstice finally dawned at Stonehenge to be greeted by security guards and Alsatians. English Heritage and the National Trust laid on 2 coaches for the media. If they got up early in the hope of a second battle, they were doomed to disappointment. The police did finally allow 40 pagans for peace who had walked from London to attend the solstice from beyond the wire. No one else was permitted to be near the stones throughout the solstice period. The media returned to London. The police prepared to evict the convoy from their latest campsite 15 miles away at Westbury. Stonehenge remains behind barbed wire.
I think we're in a situation where the social fabric of the nation is dissolving. The nation, without the jobs and the workbenches to keep people chained to and in order that way, we're in a situation where the government has to become more and more authoritarian to maintain the privilege of the smaller and smaller number who are doing all right, and to keep the masses down. Stonehenge is just a part of that greater picture of the repression of civil rights.
I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst, where I use it to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore, and I saw it was filled with graves, and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds, and binding with briars my joys and desires.